Hello, Dr. Rusko. This is Sushma Dadi from Team 4. Here I would like to give a presentation on top 10 web application frameworks. So, the top 10 web application frameworks for web development. Now we are going to see what is a framework. A framework is a structure that you can build software on. It serves as a foundation, um, so we cannot start entirely from the scratch. Instead, we can simply use the framework. So frameworks are typically associated with a specific programming language or called as software and are suited to develop applications. And web application framework is a software that is designed to support the development of web applications, including web services, web resources, and web APIs. So web frameworks provide a standard way to build and deploy web applications on the World Wide Web, and it also aims to automate the overhead associated with common activities performed in web development. So for example, most web applications have a common set of functionalities such as handling sessions, data validation, data retrieving, error handling, and so on. So instead of having developers reinvent the wheel, they simply develop a new web app. So here we are going to see what is the need of having frameworks. So frameworks are used to create and execute web applications instead of uh, having writing the code from the scratch. We can simply use the frameworks. And if we wish for user authentication, it gives us sessions in an application. And if need of separate UI and the business logic but are short on time. So now we are going to see how the web application frameworks work. So initially, every web page is transmitted to the client browser as HTML. The domain name server matches the URL with the IP address. Then the client browser sends the HTTP request to the server, and the server sends the HTTP response back to the client. Then the client browser renders the response in the form of HTML. So the client browser sends the request for additional objects embedded in HTML in the form of images, text, CSS, or JavaScript. So the web page loads and the client browser sends asynchronous requests as required. So this is how the web application frameworks work. Now we are going to see the framework versus content management system, CMS. So using the CMS, having preset features and already styled theme for a website where one may add new features. And in CMS, programming skills are not required to make use of the CMS, and also for maintaining existing website. And in order to set up a web app through a CMS, you need to know how it will work, edit, and read code from the server. So, coming to the framework, it navigates the system through a command line, and you have to know high level language framework because frameworks are set of libraries, tools, and packages. So with the use of CMS, we do not need to know the coding, and with the use of framework, we need to know high level language. So now we are going to see what are the types of frameworks. So we have server side and web frameworks and user side frameworks like backend and front end. So coming to the server side, that is backend, it involves data management, data retrieving, security, URL routing, designing site architecture, and the server handling. And also it is capable of handling HTTP requests, managing databases, mapping URLs, improving security, simplifying the development process by forming the output data. And here are some of the languages that are used for backend like HTML, MySQL, Java, Drupal, PHP, JavaScript, Magento, Objective C, and so Rails, and so on. So these are some of the popular backend frameworks like Django, ASP.NET, Node.js, Spring Boot, Symfony, Cake PHP, Flask, and so on. So now we are going to see the client side front end server. So in the client side, it involves UI UX designing, SEO optimization, performance and scalability enhancing, creating reusable templates, and it also allows creating many animated features, and it provides pre-written code snippets, so reusable templates, integrable elements, and manage user interaction. So when you visit the website, the server takes information that you put in and sends it on to the scripting language. Then the scripting engine process the request, and then it gives the information that send back to you as a web page. So this is what that the framework works in the client side server. And these are some of the popular languages that are used for front end like HTML, JavaScript, CSS, and so on. And some top front end frameworks like Angular JS, React JS, jQuery, and so on. And in this slide, we are going to see the difference between the client and the server side. So in the client side, collects the user input. Client-side scripts mostly deal with visual and user input aspects, and the scripts may be restricted to run in a sandbox. Whereas coming to the server side, it processes the user input, and the server side scripts mostly deal with the transactions and complex computations, and processes are transparent to the users. So now we are going to see the popularly used web application frameworks worldwide. So Node.js sits in the first position with 46.31%, whereas React with 44.31, and jQuery, Express, Angular, ASP.NET, and these are all with 29, 23, 23, and 20 respectively, whereas the least credits goes to the Svelte, Nux.js, and so on. So these are the most used web frameworks among the developers in the 2022 all over the world. And now we are going to see the popular five web application frameworks. The first one is Django, whereas it is from the news sites to the social networking web apps. This framework can work well with any server-side requirement, and this framework can be used in any format such as HTML, JSON, or XML files. And the second framework is Angular. Um, so coming to the Angular, it was introduced in 2010 and then rewrote it from scratch and released in 2016 as Angular 2, and it uses TypeScript, HTML, CSS tools, and it's a mature framework to create web pages for mobile and desktop users. And the third one is Flask. Whereas it is used for backend development, it is categorized as a micro framework as it doesn't require tools and libraries by default. And the fourth one is Ember.js, whereas it is for front-end development and as an MVC framework that was released in 2011, whereas Ember features a two-way user data migration utility and binding, which Angular claims. And the fifth one is Ruby on Rails, whereas it's a server-side web application built in Ruby programming language by David Hanson. So uh, the next the next information is going to be explained by one of our teammate Hemant Gogineni, and thank you, Professor.
Good morning, Professor Usko. I am Hemant Kumar Gogineni, and today I would like to give presentation on one of our topics, top 10 web application frameworks, and I would like to continue from 5 web framework real world examples. And moving ahead to next slide, we have framework Django, and it was written in Python, and the latest version of Django is Django 1.9.2. And some of the real world examples are Google, Instagram, Pinterest, Quora, Accenture, Myntra, and MySpace. And the second framework is Angular, and this was written in JavaScript. And today we are using Angular 7.1.5. And some of the real world examples are YouTube, Weather, PS3, PayPal, and Microsoft. And the third framework is Flask, and it was also written in Python. And the latest version of Flask is Flask 2.1.2. And some of the real world examples are MIT, Uber, Airbnb, Reddit, Mozilla, and Twilio. And going ahead into the next slide, we have fourth framework Ember, and this was written in JavaScript. And today we are using the latest version Ember 3.18.1. And some of the real world examples are Netflix, Microsoft, Google, and Heroku. And the last framework is Rails, and this was coded in Ruby programming language. And today we are using the latest version of Rails 5.0.0.beta 2. And some of the real world examples are GitHub, Groupon, Urban Dictionary, and Shopify. And continuing with the next slide, we have types of web applications. And different types of web applications are static web applications, dynamic web applications, e-commerce applications, portal web applications, and management system applications. And the final one is progressive web applications. And going ahead, we have advantages of frameworks. And the first framework is Django, and the main advantages of this are it allows users to use multiple components at once, and it also provides scalability and flexibility. And the second one is Angular, and it offers TypeScript support for developing large applications, and it also have the open source libraries, materials, and grids, and is also responsive for user interface. And the third one is Flask, and the main advantages of this are it's easy to learn, and it helps for faster implementation, and it is also easy to set up, and in this we can write less code to get output. And the fourth one is Ember, and this supports both JavaScript and TypeScript, and it has the well integrated data layers. And the last one is Rails, and this has the fast application development. It's used for prototyping. And going ahead in the next slide, we have disadvantages of our web application frameworks. And the disadvantages of Django are this is not fastest option, and it is monolithic, and it has exposed on obstructive error messages. And Angular is very hard to learn, and it may have trouble while loading large quantities of data, and it doesn't have the clear documentation. And the third one is Flask, and it's not suitable for big applications, and it have no admin site and no login or authentication, and migrations of applications are very difficult. And the fourth one is Ember, and it's not suitable for small projects, and is also very hard to learn, and it offers slow rendering. And the last one is Rails, and this framework is not good choice for large applications, and the boot time for this application are very slow. And going here to the next slide, we have conclusion. Finally, I conclude that in today's web development, page design is very essential and it's very needful. And a bad design will lead to loss of visitor, and that can also lead to loss of business. And the programmers who require to use framework for project development is based on need for an application development. And in the areas such as front end and back end, cloud management, mobile or digital platform depends on frameworks. And it is also important for frequently updating the frameworks, protecting applications from new and common attacks. And moving ahead into the next slide, we have references. And these are the references I used for this presentation. And I also have the additional snapshots from Angular framework. And this is the command to install Angular framework, npm install @angular/CLI. And we need to put this command on command prompt and we need to press enter. And after pressing enter, it was installed in our computer. And to create a new project, we need to give command like ng. Ng stands for Angular and Angular new and your project name. And it would like to ask like this: would you like to add Angular routing? And we need to press Y and then press enter. And after this, an application will be developed for us. And I'm opening this application in VS Code, and it was shown like this. And this is the structure of Angular application. And next, app.module.ts is the TypeScript model for components. And next, these are the app components for TypeScript. Here it shows the component like app root, template URL, and styles URL. And we have the title of our application, my app. And going here into the next slide, we have all HTML components for my application. And this is the app.component.html. Here we have all the HTML components. And going ahead to the next slide, we have the index for our application, index.html. Here we can write our code in the body. And going ahead to the next slide, we have application configuration. And here we have angular.json. These are the configuration for application. It's shown like this. And we have the all npm packages in package.json. These are the all npm packages. And next, I will show you how to edit the documentary while pushing into GitHub. Here we have readme.md, and here we can push our document into GitHub. And then we need to run our application by giving this command ng serve. So our application will be run like this. And last it shows compiled successfully. And after this, we need to go into the browser and we need to put local host for 4200, and it was shown here. And this is the final output for our application. This is the application I have developed. And thank you, Professor, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you so much.